Hey guys, Sam from Live Well Health Centre here. As we're moving from our winter sports to our summer sports, we thought it would be good to give you a quick recap on how to manage those acute sporting injuries and what steps to follow. So we're all quite familiar with our RICE method, our rest, ice, compression and elevation. However, as research has developed and changed, we've actually got a new acronym that we like to follow, our peace and our love. So for our first step in peace, we have protection. So obviously in the first few days of an injury, we want to avoid aggravating it as much as possible. If it's something, say an ankle injury, we want to avoid weight bearing as much as possible, trying to do any unnecessary movements that may hurt the injury further. Our second step, still following our RICE method, would be our elevation. So we want to make sure to optimize blood flow as much as possible. So again, using our ankle as an example, we want to elevate the injury to above our heart level. So sitting on the couch, making sure you have a few pillows stacked up that you can rest your ankle on, just to help get that blood flow and assist with any healing time. Our next step would be avoid anti-inflammatories. And I know this sounds really contradictory, and inflammation and swelling can cause a lot of pain at the site of an injury. However, we also now know that inflammation, particularly in the first 24 to 48 hours, is a really crucial step in that healing process of an injury. So if it's possible to manage without taking anti-inflammatories, such as your Voltaren or your Nurofen, we want to do that as much as possible. So we'd probably be guiding you towards something more of a Panadol for pain management if it's needed. And you always want to make sure that you're checking with a pharmacist if you're taking any kind of new medications as well. Fourth step would be your compression. So still following our RICE method, we're just adding a few extra steps in as we go. So if you've got something like a compression sock or a bandage that you can wrap around the site, just to try and compress that as much as possible, that's still something that's recommended. Our fifth step in our peace step would be our education. So education is really important with any side of injury and knowing what steps to follow next. So if you have any questions or concerns about the injury that you've received, it's always best to touch base with either your osteo or your doctor to make sure that you're doing the best thing for you. Moving on to the second half of our acronym, LOVE. So your L being load. So obviously we want to get you back doing sport as soon as possible. We don't want you on the sidelines for too long, but it's really important that we manage that load correctly and that we are gradually reloading the site of injury and not rushing too fast. We'd rather miss one training session or one game over the weekend rather than having to miss the entire season because you've gone too quick too soon. Our second step in our LOVE acronym is Optimism. I know it's easier said than done, particularly when you're in pain, but the research shows us that more positive mindset that you have towards an injury and the more education you have surrounding that injury, the quicker that you can actually recover and get back to doing the things that you love. So you want to have a really positive mindset, make sure that you've got all the education, all the information that you need, and that'll just help you know all the steps following getting you back into sport. Our third step would be V, our vascularization. So we want to get back doing cardiovascular activity as soon as possible. That can be just little things depending on what level of pain you're in. You want to be doing things like going for a walk, a light jog if you can, or even getting on a stationary bike and seeing how you go with that before getting back into sport. It's really important when you are getting back into exercise that we're really listening to our body and knowing what our pain levels are. So when we're looking at pain research, we want to make sure that your pain is staying under a 5 out of 10 in terms of your pain scale. It's really unlikely, according to the research, that if you are under a 5 out of 10, that you will re-injure that site or cause more damage that's already been done. And then our final step is our E, getting back into exercise. So as we said, we want to get you back into exercise as soon as possible, but it's about following the correct steps and making sure that we're getting you in for the long haul the entire season and not rushing too quickly. If you have any questions about any of these steps or you need to know more about your acute sporting injury, make sure you give us a call or book online and we can help you out.